Hi everyone, Happy New Year. As many of you might have heard, because it's now 2024, there are a number of works created in the year 1928 that are now in the public domain. From books like The House at Pooh Corner, the second Winnie the Pooh novel, and All Quiet on the Western Front, to films like The Singing Fool, the sequel to The Jazz Singer, and the original silent version of the Charlie Chaplin hit The Circus, these works are all now free to copy, share, and build upon. And perhaps the most famous example of these is the very first Mickey Mouse cartoon, Steamboat Willie. So, because of all this, let's talk a bit about the issue of copyright and particularly how it relates to original popular music. And let's start with Mickey Mouse, because he's actually the reason we've had to wait so long for all these works to make it into the public domain. See, back in 1928, when Steamboat Willie was first released, copyright only lasted for 28 years initially, with a chance to renew once for an additional 28 years, for a maximum copyright protection period of 56 years. This was based on the Copyright Act of 1909 and would have put Steamboat Willie into the public domain in 1984. But in the 1950s, there was a renewed push in Congress to update copyright law in the US. This was due to the advent of new technologies, such as radio and television, as well as to allow the U.S. to modify antiquated copyright practices to better align with a UNESCO-developed framework governing international copyright protections called the Universal Copyright Convention, which had been drawn up in 1952. This all culminated in the Copyright Act of 1976, which, among other things, extended the copyright duration for works made for hire, also known as corporate authorship, such as Steamboat Willie and almost all Origipop songs, to 75 years. This would have put the earliest version of Mickey Mouse into the public domain in 2003, except that it actually applies at the end of the year, making it technically January 1st, 2004. But since 1990, the Disney company had actually been lobbying for an extension to copyright in order to prevent their earliest cartoons from falling into the public domain. Now, Disney wasn't the only one pushing for this extension. The estate of prolific Origipop composer George Gershwin was lobbying for it as well. And Disney argued at the time that it was really only to better align with the European Union, which had also recently extended their copyright duration to 95 years. But regardless of the reasons why and who was pushing for it, the end result of this intense lobbying effort was the Copyright Term Extension Act, which passed in 1998. This law, which many referred to as the Mickey Mouse Protection Act, extended copyright for works for hire to 95 years. Now, Steamboat Willie would be protected until January 1st, 2024. And that's where we are today. In recent years, Disney had indicated that they wouldn't push for a further extension, and so this is still the current law. And as a result, Steamboat Willie and this early version of Mickey Mouse are now in the public domain and free for anyone to use, share, and adapt. And this is also true of all Origipop songs published in 1928. Some of the most famous are Cole Porter's Let's Do It, Let's Fall in Love from the 1928 musical Paris, the Al Jolson hit Sonny Boy from the previously mentioned film The Singing Fool, and the De Silva, Brown, and Henderson number You're the Cream in My Coffee, originally for the 1928 Broadway musical Hold Everything, but more recently given new life by Seth MacFarlane when he introduced it on his 2011 album Music is Better Than Words. Now, the versions of these and other 1928 songs that are now in the public domain only consist of the original sheet music as published that year. Later arrangements are excluded, and audio recordings of these songs are also still copyrighted. Actually, audio recordings have a slightly different rule than other works, and only enter the public domain 100 years after they were first released. But this is still good news. It means that the original sheet music for so many wonderful songs are now free and available for everyone to share, adapt, and perform. But sometimes there are still sheet music websites like musicnotes.com that, for a variety of reasons, still charge you for public domain songs. An example of this can be seen in George Gershwin's How Long Has This Been Going On? This song, whose original sheet music is seen here, was published in 1927 and is definitely in the public domain and can be accessed for free from the Lester S. Levy Sheet Music Collection website. But for some reason, Music Notes is charging $5.79 and then $4.99 for each additional print for what looks like the exact same song. I guess the Music Notes version has guitar chords instead of ukulele chords, but if that's not something you need, just go get the original version for free. So, if you're looking for an old song, definitely make sure to figure out when it was first published to see if it's in the public domain. The Levy website, which I'll link in the description, is a really good source for these old songs, as well as a few others, which I'll put in the description as well. Now, there are also some exceptions to copyright, such as the doctrine of fair use, which will allow you to access copyrighted work for free if you want the work for personal use or research only, and don't adapt, publish, or perform anything from the work. And actually, if you find a copy of an old song's sheet music at one of those online sources I mentioned, and it's still copyrighted, you can usually get a copy of it anyway if you simply email the institution and tell them that it's for personal use only, and promise not to do anything else with it. And this is especially helpful if the original sheet music of a song is no longer in publication or accessible anywhere. And actually, this happens a lot, and it's one of the reasons I personally don't really like the copyright law, at least as it applies to this older music. It makes no sense that if the copyright holders of an old song are no longer actively publishing or otherwise making available the sheet music, that they can still claim copyright and deny people from accessing it. And that's not just my opinion. One scholar states that the current copyright law locks up not just famous works, but a vast swath of our culture, including material that is commercially unavailable. Fortunately, the doctrine of fair use can help overcome this. An example of this is the really fun song Monstro the Whale, written for use in the promotional campaign for the 1940 Disney film Pinocchio, although not actually heard in the final film. When I was looking for this song a few years ago, it wasn't available to purchase anywhere, but it was still under copyright, so I couldn't easily access it from one of those online collections. Fortunately, the Levy collection had a copy, and once I contacted them and told them I only wanted it for personal use, they let me have a copy under the policy of fair use. Now, here on my channel, I post a fair amount of old songs that include pictures of the original sheet music and a MIDI piano version of the music. Over half the songs I've posted are in the public domain, and most of the remaining entries are fairly obscure songs that will be in the public domain within a year or two, and/or are songs, like Monster the Whale, that aren't available to purchase online but can be accessed under fair use from some of those online collections. I don't mind sharing these ones, but there are a couple of songs that I've posted that are definitely still under copyright, will be for some time, and are easily purchasable from online sheet music vendors. But I'm not making any money from these songs, and I'm not trying to skirt the law. Essentially, I'm just trying to share these old songs that have fallen by the wayside over these years and introduce them to some new listeners who might have never heard them before. And I would recommend that if you like what you hear, go purchase a copy from one of those sheet music websites. Anyways, the issue of copyright is a complicated and controversial one. Arguments can be made on both sides of the issue, and the recent altered pictures of the original Mickey do seem to be good evidence for those arguing for a bit more restrictions. But at least for these old songs, I think it's well past time for many of them to be made available to the general public. I think the fact that the sheet music for these songs is often locked up has probably contributed to the decline of this music, and has been at least a small factor in transforming it from what used to be the most popular music in this country and others for over 100 years into a genre that no one really knows about anymore and doesn't even have a good, widely recognized name. And so, every year on January 1st, I will happily celebrate Public Domain Day and encourage you to see what old songs are now free to access and share, and hopefully as we do this, we'll discover lost gems and learn more about this rich heritage of our popular culture past. Thanks for watching.